What if I told you that in 2021, there was a player who had as many home runs as Aaron Judge, the same offensive output as Jose Ramirez, and was worth as many wins above replacement as Cedric Mullins, Jose Altuve, and Xander Bogaerts? You'd probably say that guy is pretty good, right? Perhaps one of the best in the league even. But what if I told you that that same guy barely broke the top 10 in AL MVP voting? And not only that, but they didn't even make the All-Star team that season, all while being the most valuable player on one of the best teams in all of baseball. Meet Brandon Lowe, second baseman for the Tampa Bay Rays. Unless you're from the Tampa Bay area, or you spend too much time on Fangraphs, chances are you're probably not all that familiar with him. But over his first 3 seasons in MLB, he has quietly become one of the best players in all of the American League, and arguably its best second baseman. However, even with all the success that he and his team have had over that time period, it is very rare to see his name get mentioned among the other dominant players in the league. And at this point, it just doesn't make any sense to keep him out of that conversation any longer. In my eyes, Brandon Lowe is the most underrated player in all of baseball. And in this video, I'm going to be discussing how he got to this point, just how dominant he has been, and most importantly, why some people still seem to overlook him even despite his obvious talent. Let me explain. Before we can talk about just how underrated he is in 2022, we must first talk about how Brandon Lowe has been underrated at basically every step of the way thus far. Prior to being drafted, Lowe had thrived at the University of Maryland, leading the Terrapins in most major categories through his freshman and sophomore seasons. But even though he had built himself into a relatively high prospect, he had failed to generate the kind of hype as others in his draft class, like Mickey Moniak, Ian Anderson, and Nick Senzel. This was largely the result of many injury questions that scouts had at the time, as he had started his college career with a torn ACL and ended it with a broken fibula. But regardless, the Rays seemed to really like what they saw in Lowe, enough so that they chose him in the 3rd round of the 2016 draft. And from there, he would make quick work of the minor leagues in roughly 2.5 seasons, winning Florida State League MVP, getting named to the Arizona Fall League and playing in the Fall Stars game, and hitting .297 with 22 home runs in AA and AAA in 2018. But even with those amazing performances under his belt, Lowe had still failed to get on most people's radar, as he had been overshadowed by an absolutely stacked Tampa Bay farm system. In fact, he had only made one top 100 prospect list throughout his entire time in the minors, getting ranked 93rd by Baseball America in 2019. But despite this, he was out to prove to everyone that he could thrive at the major league level. And to his credit, he did. He would get his first cup of coffee at the end of the 2018 season, and from there, he was basically off to the races. He went on a tear to start the first half of 2019, posting a .276 average, 16 home runs, a 130 WRC+, and about 2.5 wins above replacement. But unfortunately, he wouldn't get to finish his stellar rookie campaign, as injuries would sideline him for all but 6 games in the second half. As such, he would end up being overshadowed by the rise of Yordan Alvarez, and ultimately, he would end up finishing 3rd in Rookie of the Year vote. But in the shortened 2020 season, he would pick right back up where he left off in the first half of 2019. There, he played 56 out of the 60 games, had a 151 WRC+, added another 14 home runs, and had roughly the same WAR as Mike Trout, Raul Acuna Jr., Juan Soto, and AL MVP Jose Abreu. But somehow, it still wasn't enough for him to get named to the first team All-MLB, as he would be overshadowed yet again, this time by DJ LeMahieu of the Yankees for the top second base spot. Throughout all of this, we see the same exact patterns popping up again and again. In each instance, we see Lowe exceeding expectations by a mile, but nobody really noticing or really caring because somebody else has stolen the spotlight at the exact same time. But in 2021, Lowe sought to change all of that by proving that he could do it for a full, complete season. and in many ways, he proved exactly that. But unfortunately, it didn't stop people from overlooking him heading into the 2022 season. So without further ado, let's talk about just how good he was in his first full season in the big leagues.
Can you believe MLB Network still won't put this man in their top 50? Brandon Lowe is on historic pace as an offensive second baseman. His career 136 OPS plus is the highest of any second baseman since integration, with at least 1,000 career plate appearances. Seriously, higher than guys like Morgan, Robinson, Utley, or Cano. He's also 8th in hitter F4 since 2020. His defense isn't great, but man, he just rakes. 39 homers last year. Back-to-back seasons finishing top 10 in MVP voting. What more do you people want?
To give you an idea of just how good he was in 2021, let's compare him to another top slugger in the American League, division rival Aaron Judge. When it comes to their basic stat lines, both players were remarkably similar in 2021. Both had basically the same number of games and had essentially the same number of plate appearances. And in those plate appearances, both players hit 39 homers while driving in just under 100 runs on the year and stealing 6 to 7 bases. Additionally, they both walked and struck out at essentially the same rate, and they put up similar numbers in isolated power, barrel rates, and sprint speeds. As such, both were worth roughly the same amount of wins above replacement in 2021 according to Fangraphs, with Judge worth 5.5 and Lowe worth 5.2. And keep in mind, Lowe is doing all of this while being 100 pounds lighter and 9 inches shorter than Judge is. Realistically, there should be no way that he's keeping up with Judge's power production. But essentially, he is. And not only that, he also had 7 more doubles than Judge in 2021, all while hitting into 14 fewer double plays. That being said, there is one key difference between the two, and that's in their triple slash line of batting average, on-base percentage, and slugging percentage. As you can see here, Judge has about a 30 to 40 point advantage in each department, and that in turn led to Judge having an advantage in more advanced hitting metrics like WRC+. However, when we look behind these numbers, we see that it's a lot less decisive than you might think. As we've already established, both players had roughly the same number of plate appearances, home runs, walks, and strikeouts in 2021, meaning that both players put the ball in play at roughly the same rate. But when it comes to balls being put into play, there are 2 main factors that are out of the hitter's control, that being batted ball luck and defensive alignment. A good way to measure the effect of these factors is through BABIP, or batting average on balls in play. If a player's BABIP is higher than normal, it usually means that they get some good breaks to go their way and they're able to find holes in the defense. But when it's lower than normal, the opposite is true, and they're often hitting the ball right into the teeth of the defense. In 2021, the league average BABIP was .292. In that department, Aaron Judge was one of the best in baseball, with a BABIP of .332. Meanwhile, Lowe wasn't nearly as fortunate, as he ended up with a BABIP of .280 on the year. And of course, Aaron Judge is always going to have an advantage in this department, largely due to his size. At 6'7" and 285 pounds, he's obviously going to hit the ball much harder than Lowe on a regular basis. And as we all know, hard hit balls tend to go for hits much more often. But even beyond bad batted ball luck and Judge's height advantage, there's still another factor here which is really handicapping Lowe, that being the shift. As a left-handed hitter, Lowe has to face the shift much more often than his right-handed hitting counterpart, as shifts tend to be much more effective against left-handed hitters. So just how big is this gap? Well, in 2021, Aaron Judge had 127 plate appearances where he did not face the shift, meaning that about 20% of the time, the defense was playing him straight up. Meanwhile, Lowe had only 22 plate appearances the entire season where he did not face a single shift. For hitters like Lowe and Judge, who traditionally get a lot of their power and production from their pull side, this makes a huge difference. And in this case, the result was Lowe's worst batting average as a pro and a subsequent drop in other metrics such as on-base percentage, slugging percentage, and wOBA. But I say all of that to say this. Even while facing bad batted ball luck and increased shifts, Brandon Lowe still managed to be just as valuable as the likes of Aaron Judge in 2021, as well as many of the other top hitters in the American League. And that's a testament to just how great of a hitter he has been in 2021, and frankly, the last 3 seasons as a whole. But of course, that just leaves us with one more question that we still have to answer. So the main question here is this. If he has been so good for his first 3 seasons and he's only getting better, why is it that we almost never hear about him? Well, the first answer that people point to is the obvious one. He plays for the Tampa Bay Rays. But even on the most anonymous team in all of baseball, he still seems to have trouble standing out among his peers. After all, he doesn't have the flair for the dramatic of Randy Arozarena. He doesn't have the kind of hype that Wander Franco has. He doesn't have the good looks of Tyler Glasnow, nor does he have his cannon of a right arm. And he's certainly not as fun as Brett Phillips. In many ways, his personality is more aligned with that of Mookie Betts and Mike Trout, who tend to shy away from the spotlight and prefer to let their play do all the talking. While Betts and Trout were able to naturally gain attention through their otherworldly performance and playing in major media markets, Lowe hasn't been able to perform at that kind of level just yet, and playing in Tampa means that he's basically invisible at the national stage. In fact, prior to researching this video, I had never seen a single interview with the man, nor had I ever even heard his voice before. But this is where living in a golden age of analytics really helps analysts and fans alike. Prior to the early 2000s, a player like Lowe could easily get lost in the shuffle, as aside from his home run totals, there isn't much about him that sticks out on the surface. But thanks to the advent of more modern metrics, we are now able to more fully appreciate everything that he brings to the table, and more importantly, smart teams like the Rays are able to fully realize his true potential. Now, it's hard to tell just how high his ceiling truly is. After all, he's only played 3 full seasons. But one thing is for sure. If he continues to grow at the rate he is now, and he's able to keep up this pace into the foreseeable future, he's not going to be anonymous for much longer. But with that being said, I want to hear from you now. What do you think of Brandon Lowe? And if he's not the most underrated player in baseball, who is? Let me know in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. And if you really like our videos and you want to be able to support us while getting yourself some amazing perks in the process, please consider supporting us on our Patreon at patreon.com/thediamondbaseball. As always, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.